public. I know it's not our property, it's not our tower, but it is adjacent to the fields. I mean, and we do have athletes there, and we did have a public speaker at our last board meeting, and she spoke to us when we were most recently at Eastern Middle School. Is the county communicating with the Blair community? Can we request that they communicate or have some notification so they can have a hearing? I mean, I think if it was under consideration for one of our properties, we most definitely would give our school community the opportunity to communicate with us. Can we make that request?
Yes, we can make that request, and that is part of the conversations. I'm not aware of how their process works in terms of how public hearings or community input can occur, but we are certainly sharing the concerns that we've heard from our school community, and in hopes that they can obviously turn that into some form of a public discussion or feedback session. But I do not have a specific date or essentially an overall process for which that can happen yet, but we're hopeful that it will happen.
One thing we could do, Ms. O'Neill and Ms. Dixon and Dr. Daka, is have, we can prepare a letter from the Fiscal Management Committee or some composition to the county requesting appropriate communication and opportunity for public engagement, if that's something that you would like.
I think that would be a good idea. I mean, whether it's not our tower, or proposed tower, but it is adjacent, very, very close to our property and our students. So I think it would be appropriate to send such a letter and make that request.
Okay. We'll put something together.
Dr. Duffy, did you have any?
I had the same question.
Right, yeah. So my question, just as to follow up to what Pat said, did they communicate with you did they let you know that they were going to put the cell tower?
No, our office was not informed of the change.
Okay. Well, I would second what Pat said. I think, we certainly were blindsided at our meeting over at Eastern with the Blair cluster because, I didn't know anything about it. She didn't know anything about it, as well. So
I think we also need to include that in the letter, that we, we understand it's not ours, but as an adjacent neighbor, it would have been appropriate for them to notify us.
Right. Just a courtesy. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Well,
thank you, Seth.
Thank you, board members, for adjusting that.
Okay. Okay, we are ready for 3.1, the category 12 expenses, or as known in finance, Cat 12.
Good morning, board. This is Tony Tucci. One of his categories he does the budgeting for the county public school system is category 12. So I'll kick this off and let Tony present. And I think between the two of us, we should be able to answer your questions.
Okay.
Tony tells me he knows this stuff, so.
All right.
Category 12 is your fixed charges. It's basically your benefits package for the employees of Montgomery County Public Schools. $610 million in the budget, so it's not de minimis. It's about 22.8% of the budget, which is fairly significant. When most of our dollars go to salaries, you would expect the benefits to follow. Included are the pensions, health benefits, our Social Security contributions, health insurance, the workers' comp, and to a lesser extent, tuition reimbursement. But that's all included in Category 12. And I guess the other point to make here is twice a year, MCPS is required to send a letter to the county council explaining our Category 12 expenditures for the previous 6 months and our plans going forward for those Category 12 expenditures. So that the next letter will be due to the county council March 31st. So we wanted to give you a heads up here. We are in the process of preparing that letter now. You should have it within the week or so. So, Tony?
All right. As Dan mentioned, we sent 2 letters to the county council, one in September and then one in March. And in this letter, we primarily focus on what our current strategy is for our pension fund and our healthcare fund, along with what our FICA calculations are, our tuition reimbursements, and just the status of currently where we are in FY20. So one of the main things that we look at is the board's current strategy to achieve a desired pension funding level and the short and long-term effects of that strategy in Category 12. I believe last year at this time, the board had recommended to have a funding strategy of close to 90%. As of now, I can tell you that we're at about 76.6%. So we're still a little below that 90%. So that's going to, obviously, if we're going to maintain that current level at 90%, it's going to impact what our contributions are to the budget. Also, the other thing that we disclose for pension is the estimates for the annual employer contributions for a 5-year period, along with the major factors that affect the pension contributions over the next 5 years. And I'll talk about those briefly in a little bit. For healthcare, we look at the current year budget versus actual revenue and expenditure data for both the active and the retiree group insurance funds. And then we also disclose our projected year-end balance for both funds as well. Some of the major pension strategy components that we look at, one being the normal rate that we use to calculate the contribution for the employer. This is really the driving force behind our budget. Right now, our contribution is calculated at 5.09% of position salaries. And this is currently 32 basis points higher than our actuarial recommendations. And we're doing that in order to accelerate the fund reaching a 90% funding level. Since we're at 76.8% right now, we need to contribute a little bit more in appropriation in order to get our funding closer to that 90%. And just to give you an idea, 0.32% represents approximately $5 million of additional funding each year. So 1% change in the normal rate that we use would be a $16 million budget production. So at the beginning of FY20, the pension fund, like I said before, is currently at 76.8%. And, we still have a ways to go to get to 90. We're still using 5.09% in the budget out years to project our contributions. FY20 is currently at $82.6 million for our employer contribution, and then the FY21 projected amount is $85.9 million, assuming that we still use 5.09% for our budget. Some other factors that affect the contributions are the salary adjustments, any change in general wage adjustment, continuing salaries for negotiations, if we have step increases, longevities. All of that obviously impacts our position salaries, so that will ultimately basically change what we would contribute for our employer. Because our rate that we use of 5.09% is calculated from the position salary dollars that we have for tax-supported dollars. So if we have $1.6 billion in position salaries and we use 5.09%, that's how we come up with the $82.6 million in our contribution. Some of the other factors, obviously workforce change. If we have growth, we have reductions, accelerators, that's going to change our salary dollars. And then our investment performance within the fund, that's a huge component as well. Right now, we're assuming a 7% investment return in our pension fund. If we gain more, then maybe our actuarials will come back a year later and say, hey, listen, your rate can be lowered because your fund is performing well. I can tell you that in our 10-year average right now for our pension fund is at 8.3%. So long-term, it's been doing well. But short-term, last year, we were only at 4.9%. So we're assuming 7% on an average annual year for one of our assumptions. Other assumptions, obviously, are changes in mortality tables, turnover rates, and inflation, and so forth. One of the other main components in our Category 12 letter that we highlight is the active and retiree group insurance plan. Right now, our fund balance for actives, our beginning fund balance in FY20 was at $28.5 million. We're expecting a projected change in balance of a negative $3.1 million in the active fund, which will get us to about $25.3 million at the end of this year. Similar to actives, our retiree beginning balance is about $26.6 million, but we're projecting a slight increase in net gain this year of about $4 million. So our balance will be at close to $30.9 million. So combined, we're looking at a little over $56 million in active and retiree group insurance fund balance. So with that, we will open it up for any questions.
And I think, one more thing we consider here is we have gone forward to the county executive with a fairly large request for increased FTE next year. So that will also drive up the contributions based on the additional 560
Right.
people we've asked for.
So that's part of the
For next year.
growth that
Yes.
we include.
Okay, all right. Pat?
So obviously, we all are aware of the stock market slump, or not crash, but significant decline last week. And the projections, I mean, my husband watches some business channel and last night, and I don't know that it's going to totally rebound this week. What is the impact on the investment fund for the pension? I mean, I realize it's, we do smoothing,
Right.
but, obviously it would have some impact on,
It's gonna, well, if let's just say our rate was affected, our investment return was affected because of the down spiral of the stock market, then we're gonna yield a lower return this year in the fund. So with that being said, when our actuarials do an analysis on the entire pension fund, they may come back and say, well, your investment return this year didn't quite yield the 7%. Maybe it was at 3 or 4%. So that's gonna be one factor in recalculating what the normal rate needs to be for the employer contribution piece.
And our investments are pretty well diversified. So a bad week last week doesn't necessarily have a long-term impact on the returns we're going to get. We have a lot of long-term investments that are much more conservative. I think we're a very conservative approach, quite frankly. Had a review last week with the one of the pension boards, and we are very, very careful in how we invest those resources.
The other thing too is we actually lowered our assumption for our investment return this past year. We were at 7.5%, and we did lower it down to 7%. So that's just to be a little bit more conservative, like
Yes.
Dan had mentioned.
Right. Yeah, I remember when Ms. Grant came to us and made that request to lower from 7.5 to 7%. So I'm curious, I know she went west. Have we been able to replace her? Is there a plan to replace her? Or
Yes,
how
there
is
is.
that?
Yes, there is. Right now, Miss Susan Lau is acting in that position. She was there with Miss Grant. She's on a higher level assignment. She's been doing a terrific job for us. And we're going to talk to you guys in the next couple of weeks. Next week, I think it is, about our long-term plan. But she is a terrific alternative for Miss Grant.
Okay. All right. G, questions? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Okay, we are now on 4.0, MCPS pension plan amendments.
So I will once again kick off this section. With us are Mr. Krishna Talur and Sharifa Yunus. Shafina Yunus.
Good morning.
Shafina was recently promoted into a new position, correct? Yes. So I congratulate her for her good work. Most of the presentation will be here by Mr. Talur. Just as an introduction, our pension plans are reviewed regularly. We keep a close eye on it. We make sure that we're consistent with other similar type of organizations. We want to make sure that our pensions are similar to what the state of Maryland offers, as you know. We want to make sure that the administration is equitable. We want to make sure that the fiscal health and sustainability of the pension funds related to what Tony was saying, but this is more on the benefits side, how we're going to provide. And today, these changes we're recommending are around the disability benefit primarily. But he'll get into a little more of the details. There's two portions. There's a core and supplemental pension plans for us. Individuals not eligible for the Maryland State Pension Plan receive a core benefit from MCPS only. All other MCPS receive supplemental benefits from Montgomery County, primarily from the state, but a supplemental from the county. And employees contribute about 7.5% of their salary into their retirement, which
About
is
or 7.5?
it's 7.5, which is a 0.5% higher than the federal CSRS retirement was. But the MCPS is still entitled to Social Security benefits when they retire, where the federal was not entitled to those same benefits. So I'll kick it off here. If you want to go from here, Krishna.
Good morning. I'm
Good
Krishna Tulur, Director, Employee Retiree Service Center, Shafin and Yunus, currently the Senior Specialist for Retirement. As we know, as Mr. Morello mentioned, that we bring these kind of changes, recommendations from time to time. One of the biggest changes that were implemented to the MCPS pension plan was back in 2011 to be in the same line as State of Maryland changes when Maryland State Retirement Agency proposed and what is now called a reformed pension plan. Basically, it changes the vesting period and the retirement eligibility timelines, and MCPS followed suit and introduced a reformed pension plan provisions for individuals who were hired on or after July 1, 2011. So today we are going to talk about five proposed changes. And as part of the conversation, we are going to talk about when individuals are normally eligible to retire. That's going to be part of the discussion we're going to have. And before we get into that, we just thought it would be helpful for all of us to kind of know that individuals who were hired before July 1, 2011 are eligible for what is called the normal retirement benefits at any age after completing 30 years of service, or at the age of 62 with 5 years of service. Individuals who were hired on or after July 1, 2011 can retire at any age when their age and years of service adds up to a number of 90, and State of Maryland calls it Rule of 90. So if somebody was hired at the age of 30 and works for 30 years, they're at 60 plus 30 years of service adds up to 90, and that's when they're eligible to retire. So depending on when you were hired and your age can result in a different time when you can retire. If not, individuals can retire at age 65 after completing 10 years of service. So that's the change in the vesting period. In the earlier plan, it was 62 years with 5 years of service. So the first change that we are proposing to the pension plan is in the accidental disability benefit plan. Right now, individuals who apply for accidental disability or a work-related injury that results in individuals needing to retire, they are paid 66 2/3 of their average salary, average final salary, as disability retirement benefits. This is reduced by any other allowance that's paid to them by the state retirement agency, which is teachers, but just have the supplemental plan with MCPS. At the same time, the current pension plan also states that if somebody is injured at work or have to retire on an accidental disability after age 62 or 65, based on whatever pension plan that you're a member of, they are paid their normal retirement benefit, which is based on your years of service, average final salary, and the formulas that are built and approved in our pension plan. So 66 2/3 prior to the retirement, normal retirement after, normal retirement benefits when you're at the retirement age. In order to consistently implement and dispense benefits, we are proposing the following change, which is that if an individual is not eligible for normal retirement benefits at the time they apply for retirement, we are proposing that their benefits be calculated at 66 2/3 of their average final salary, with the appropriate reductions for any similar benefits that they receive. But when the individual attains normal retirement, the benefits be recalculated to be paid at the normal retirement benefit, as if the individual worked until the time they reach their normal retirement. And any individual who is eligible for normal retirement at the time of application and approval, they will continue to receive their normal retirement benefit. So this would alleviate what may seem like an inconsistency of some individual getting 66 2/3 for the rest of their life in the pension benefits, if they were injured and had to retire before a certain age versus after a certain age. So
Can I jump for 1 second? So if an individual started working for MCPS much later in their career, their annuity at the recalc would be at the calculation would be very, very small. They wouldn't have reached any years of service when that calculation took place. So let's say somebody started to work close to 62 or 65. Their annuity would be much, much smaller. So we're trying to give them the opportunity to acquire more years of service for their final calculation after they reach that age where we would convert from the 66 2/3 to their normal retirement.
as part of the change, as part of the proposed changes, there is no changes proposed in the way the formulas that are used to calculate benefits. It is the benefit itself that is provided is going to be calculated in the format that is being proposed. In proposing this change, we worked with our pension attorneys, Mr. Sivan, who has moved on to a different role, and our outside pension attorneys who advise us on our pension plans, the legalities, and benefits around it. And we considered the three plans. One is to make it similar to State of Maryland pension plan, which is to pay 66 2/3 of average final salary, regardless of the age at which individual is retiring based on as a result of a accidental disability situation. The second plan we considered was a model that is adopted within state of Illinois, which states that individual is paid 66 2/3 of their average final salary for a certain period of time, and it ends when one of the following takes place. Either for some reason it is not considered to be a disability anymore within the after the medical examination, it is determined that the person no longer has the disability. That's when the provision ceases. If a member attains age of 65, if the accidental disability started before age 60, or 5th anniversary of the effective date of the accidental disability. So at the end of 5 years, it reverts back to whatever is the normal retirement calculation was, or if an individual passes on. So the proposal that we have in front of you has precedence with other pension plans where the 66 2/3 percentage of your annual average final salary is paid out to a certain period of time, and then it is reversed or it is re-adjudicated as a normal pension benefit, as if you worked all that time.
Why should the board do that?
It would be, there would be a couple of things. One, it would ensure, at the current plan, when an individual, let's say, who retired before the age of 62 or 65 at this time, with smaller years of service, they might end up with a 66 2/3, or they would end up with the 66 2/3 of average final salary as benefits for the rest of their life, whereas an individual who retired with a similar years of experience, who retires after that age, gets paid their retirement benefits based on their service and salary. So it has a view, it creates a view that individuals don't have the equitable provisions within the accidental benefit plan. And so by changing the plan as we are proposing, accidents could happen at any time. And if and when there is an unfortunate situation of an accident, that the benefits are distributed equitably regardless of when the accident took place. That an individual retiring after a certain age does not have either a disadvantage or an advantage of having a different calculation altogether for the entirety of the pension benefit dispensation period.
So are you thinking that, maybe some folks that get that disability are getting over a little bit, by asking us to make this change? Or what?
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, because we know that, in some professions, folks get a disability retirement and then go on to have full-time work in other jobs. So I'm just wondering what facilitated or
so one of
how did you come up with
the
this?
key components that facilitated this thinking was the changing nature of our workforce. The plans, when they were written many years ago, now almost 40 years ago, these go back to the 80s, we had a time when individuals would have come to work in MCPS at a younger age and worked here for many years. And if you have a 30 to 35 years of retirement service, your normal retirement benefit as it calculates would have always resulted to being more than 66 2/3 of your average annual salary. Over the years, with individuals, as you mentioned, they may have a situation, it could be a retirement, a normal retirement, accidental retirement, some kind of a disability retirement. However, they're able to do one of many jobs that are available in MCPS, but may not necessarily have those number of years of service to either benefit from a more than 66 2/3 of the average salary as your pension. So we would have individuals who may start in their 50s and may face some kind of a disability situation within 7 or 8 years. And if the same individual retired just before they were 62, because of this situation, they would have a certain, what might seem like a higher pension at 66 2/3 rate. But the same individual retires because of timing or accident right after a certain age, their benefits would be calculated based on their service. That in itself could create a situation where it would look like it did not seem fair that retirement happening a month before or a month after a certain age would create a large disparity in the type of pension benefits that individual gets. By making this change, we would ensure that regardless of what is the time of your accident, that everybody is treated the same way until they reach a certain point in terms of their retirement service, and then calculate their benefits exactly the same way, regardless
Yes.
when the accident took place. So it would seem, and from an implementation standpoint, it would be we believe it's an equitable view of how the plan would be dispensed.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but each year of service is equivalent to about 2% of your final pay for your calculation. So if you only put in that 7 or 8 years, you would only get at annuity, if you hit the whatever the requirements are, 14, 16% of your salary instead of the 66 and 2/3.
Right.
I'm hearing. So have we, talked to any of the unions about this or the Retirees Association?
So
This is a significant change, I think.
It is, and what we're doing here is we wanted to bring it before you guys, because we are going to bring it before the full board, if you
Right.
agree, for a discussion. We wanted to brief you guys first, and then we're going to reach out to our partners with the associations and retirement programs to give them a detailed briefing on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that obviously it needs to be presented to our employee organizations. And I also think that board members not on this committee may need to have an individual meeting to better understand the implications.
We understand.
I would really recommend individual or 2 briefings for board members
Absolutely.
on that. Okay. Judy? No? Okay.
The second proposed change is also in the disability retirement area, and this is what we call as ordinary disability retirement, or a non-service related disability. Currently, an individual files for a non-service related disability as a result of illness. The plan provision provides service credit until the age of 62 if they were in a pre-2011 pension plan, or provide credit until age 65 if they're in a post-2011 pension plan. What it means is that an individual who may have worked for 30 years with MCPS and is otherwise eligible to retire, they would get additional service credits until the time they reach a certain age. So our proposal is that to keep this provision of the plan consistent with the changes that are being proposed with the accidental disability plan, is that individuals be provided service credits for a period of time until they're eligible for a normal retirement. This would, once again, similar to the accidental disability provision of certain individuals getting more or less years of service credits from the time the application for retirement benefits are filed to a certain age, or in the current plan, that results in individuals getting different number of years of service. We are proposing to streamline this option of the benefit plan, once again, to make sure that individuals get credit until the time they reach their normal retirement eligibility.
So what you're saying is, I think, is while they're on disability retirement, they're still accruing years of service for their final calculation.
Correct. Correct.
Keep going.
The remaining 3 proposed changes are to bring certain provisions of our pension plan in line with the state of Maryland pension plan. As Mr. Morella alluded earlier, our plans are similar to the state of Maryland pension plan, but they're not the same. The next proposed amendment would be that if a retiree is rehired into a pension eligible position or a permanent employment, which which happens occasionally in small numbers. In the state of Maryland plan, they are not re-enrolled back in the pension plan, and they don't get additional service credits, and the benefits are not dispensed once again at a different rate. What state of Maryland does, under certain circumstances, if individuals come back to the same employer for the first 5 years, they implement a certain type of earnings limitations in how much your total earnings could be with pension and your employment. Whereas the MCPS plan currently suspends the pension benefits if an individual is rehired, provides additional credits for the work that's performed, and then when the individuals retire, the pension is re-adjudicated and the benefits are dispensed, taking into account the additional service. We are proposing that this part of the pension plan be amended to be in line with state of Maryland pension plan by not stopping the pension benefits that the individuals, if they're rehired in a pension eligible position, that they continue receiving their pension, and there be an earnings limitation which is typically the pension benefits and your annual earning does not exceed the average final salary that was calculated for your pension benefits. And if your annual earnings go above that, then the pension benefit is reduced appropriately. We have not come across this situation way too often within MCPS plans. It's a very, very small number of individuals who have come back to work here, and we don't believe the impact of this would be significant, but it would be more or less a procedural change to have the plans be more aligned.
Yeah, the only advantage for the employee coming back would be additional years of service for their ultimate calculation for their annuity. Their compensation would be the same as if they were a full-time employee. Now it's just combined between two different pools of money.
Okay. So, for example, let's say, a principal retired, and they were getting their retirement benefits, and they came out of retirement to become a principal again in Montgomery County. How would that work?
This change would not have an impact on them because the principals are members of the state retirement pension plan. And when a principal is rehired into a position, unless it is for within the state of Maryland pension plan, there are certain types of rehired employments that are exempt from earnings limitation, such as you're rehiring an individual back into a high-need school or a school that was designated as the one that requires improvement from the State Board of Education. And if you bring an individual back to be a teacher or an administrator in those locations, they're not applicable, they're not subjected to the earnings limitations. Otherwise, if they come back, they are subjected to the earnings limitation right now. And our teachers, our principals, and a number of support professionals who are part of the state of Maryland pension plan are already subjected to this limitation. So we are proposing this amendment to have the MCPS pension plan to have a similar provision rather than the one that we have right now, where we stop the pension payment during when the individuals come back to work.
And then you recalculate it when they go on retirement.
Correct. That's what we do right now within the MCPS pension plan, whereas the state of Maryland pension plan does not do that.
We only recalculate it if they're vested. They require 10 years of vesting currently. So if they're vested, then we recalculate the benefit. Otherwise, they're just getting their contributions and interest back.
So what caused this amendment, or where did this come from as well, doing that, making that change?
evaluate the provisions of our pension plan periodically. As COMA regulations come along or state passes new laws that impact pension, Ms. Eunice, her team, they are constantly in touch with the state retirement agency. We see the impact on MCPS, even if it is a state of Maryland pension plan, to see how it may impact our plan and whether any changes are warranted. Sometimes we make changes and sometimes we don't, because it does not make sense to have it the same way for various and assorted reasons, because they are a much bigger pension plan and we are not. Some of these, especially the rehiring of retirees and a couple of others that Ms. Eunice is going to talk, have been under consideration for a couple of years. And we had a lot of internal conversations, both within operations, with Dr. Zuckerman, with Ms. Diamond, Mr. Sivan, and our pension attorneys. And some of the other amendments come along as a result of legal advice or the situations that may present themselves, such as a request to review the pension amendments. So these plans were under consideration, these amendments were considered for the last couple of years, and similar questions that you're asking, the team members asked. We went back and looked at the provisions to make sure that implementing these changes would continue to allow us to run equitably and at the same time smoothly from the operations perspective apply the provisions of the plan.
Mm-hmm. And so this would take effect whenever the board voted to approve it?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Ladies?
You did say that this usually doesn't happen. I can only think of one person that I know of who came back after retirement to be a principal.
Yes.
But generally, when people come back, they're paid per diem?
Correct.
Okay, so it's just a really small number that we're talking about.
Absolutely. And that individual who was rehired as a principal at a high-need school was exempted from the earnings limitation. There is a specific paperwork that Human Resources has to file with Maryland State Retirement. Now, whether or not individuals are paid on a per diem basis or on a permanent employment basis, we are required to provide an earnings list every year to state of Maryland. So even when individuals come back on a per diem position, there is an earnings limitation that state of Maryland implements. But individuals coming back on per diem based positions, they are mostly temporary assignments in nature, and they're not eligible for membership anyways. So individuals coming back, as you correctly recalled, it's very few. And we could probably count them, with 10 fingers to the most part.
Okay. Well, if you could let us know, how many people
Yes,
we're
we
talking
will.
about, that would be good.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have two other procedural amendments. Ms. Eunice is going to talk about them.
The next proposed change applies to only non-vested employees. Non-vested employees who either terminate employment after June 30, 2020, or who are currently non-vested in the plan, do not accrue interest on the accumulated contribution and interest effective July 1. Currently, non-vested employees are non-vested in the prior to 2011 plan if they have 5 years of service. If they don't have 5 years of service, and after 2011, it's if they don't have 10 years of service, they are considered non-vested. So we are proposing to change this provision to have them not accrue interest if they're non-vested. If they're vested, they'll continue to accrue interest till their normal retirement age.
And if I may add, this was an amendment that was made to the state pension plans recently in the last few months to stop accruing interest on individuals who are no longer employed but not yet vested to receive pension benefit.
Okay. And the fifth?
The last slide, we have two changes on the slide. One is to broaden the categories of military service so our employees can claim credit for services. Right now, this gives parity with the state because the state has the same service definitions, so we are adopting that from the state pension plan. The other benefit is for the surviving spouses if the member passes away while on employment with MCPS. We are proposing to simplify the language and the required documents so the surviving spouse can claim the death benefit.
Okay. How much do military folks get in terms of service credit?
So the maximum they can claim is 5 years. Once they have 10 years of credited service, the maximum number of service they can claim is 5 years. It's the same as the state.
Okay.
So that'll accrue 10% of your annuity.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
This concludes the scheduled part of the presentation. I know we had questions along the way, and if you do have any questions, we are here to answer. Otherwise, as shared during the presentation, we do have additional briefings that we are going to conduct,
Right.
and schedule time with board members
Well,
before the final presentation.
I don't have any problem with referring this to the board, do you?
No.
But I would suggest that you might want to do some briefings.
And we will.
And, we'll go from there.
There's a lot of outreach yet to be done. We wanted to give you guys a heads up today.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. Okay. We are now on 5.1, the fiscal year 2021 operating budget.
So this will just be a brief recap of what we've been going through the last few weeks. Plus, I think the most important slide's the last one with the calendar of upcoming events. We have, as you know, Nancy Austin and Tom Klossing at the table. I'll let Nancy take this. Yep.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're just about there. Are you clicking down? Okay. So the FY21 operating budget was presented by the superintendent on December 18th, as you know. That recommended budget was for $2.802 billion and was $47.2 million over MOE, or $121.1 million over FY20. During the board meeting on February 10th, the superintendent presented amendments to his budget, which basically was the result of the increase of revenue that we received. It was $6.1 million from the state. $3 million of that, a little over $3 million of that was from the state aid, and $3 million was for Kerwin. 4.1 of that $6.1 million was used to reduce our above maintenance of effort. So we went down from 47.2 to 43.1. And the additional $2 million from that $6.1 million was used for concentration of poverty, which was a restricted grant from the state, so those funds must align with the concentration of poverty. During the same meeting, the Board of Education presented its amendments. There were 3 instructional specialists, 3 counselors, and 1 staffing assistant, and that equaled about $1 million. So therefore, the BOE adopted a budget of $2.805 billion, which is $44.1 million over the maintenance of effort, or $124 million over FY20. So as we increase expenditures, we also have to have related revenue to support the budget because it all must balance in the end. So as I stated, we are at 124.1 million over FY20. That was the amount that was presented on Friday to the county executive. The transmittal went over. So the corresponding revenue at this point is local request as being 69.1 or 69.2. The state revenue being 38 million, which we all know is the state aid that we received, and the 16.5 million from federal and other revenue. The bulk of that amount is, of course, the bus cameras that we asked for the additional spending appropriation for as a part of the pass-through, and the $3.3 million for provisions of future supported projects, which is our grant, is just spending authority. There's also a small amount in there for an increase to the various title grants that we're receiving. So all in all, our revenue then balances to 124.1 million, which equals our proposed expenditure at this time. So what's the next steps? As I said on Friday, we transmitted our budget over to the county executive. We're hoping that on March 16th, the county executive will come out with his proposed budget. Then early in April, the county council will hold its public hearings and its work sessions that it does every year to decide on how it wants to approve its budget on May 21st. Then again, once the county approves its budget, of course, it comes back across to us, and the board will then review the budget and adopt its budget on June 11th.
Okay.
So at this point, do you have any questions?
Just a question about the bus app. Is that still in the budget?
At this point, it is, yes.
At this point, it is?
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Ms. Dixon?
Yeah.
With respect to the board's request for the FY21 operating budget, depending on what the county executive recommends and then what the county council ultimately adopts will then in turn dictate what we're able to afford. And we certainly have heard very clearly from the Board of Education around that the bus app is probably not the top priority. And so we know that for the
Okay,
future.
great. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right. Questions? So have you had discussions over at the county council and with the executive about what our needs are? Or how does that work?
Well, we have formal meetings scheduled in April.
Okay.
We have not received the county executive's budget. That'll be March 16th, at which point we'll know what he's recommending. So we haven't had any kind of formal discussions about what it is we're going to react to. I mean, there's discussion out there in the ether, but we don't have a formal number yet to respond to.
But the superintendent and the board officers met on Friday with the county executive for their protocol meeting on specifically about the operating budget request. You know, of course, by tradition, the county executive at that meeting really doesn't show his hand. But it's
He did not.
So, I mean, it's anybody's guess what will come out on March 16th, and then the play is at the county council.
Right. Well, I raised the question just so that those who are looking at this meeting understand that, I think that there are probably some discussions about that. So it's good to know. All righty. Dr. Daka?
No.
Nothing?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are ready for 6.1, the Financial Business Information Systems Update.
I'll kick this off quickly. This is what's taking up a significant amount of the CFO and COO's time, Octo's time, time and effort, resources right now. When I came into this position month and a half ago, this was hot on the plate. We have an implementation date coming of April 6th to go live with our new system. It's going to be a all hands on deck push for the next 5 weeks. There's a tremendous amount of system integration and data pushing forward that has to happen. There'll be some blackout periods, which you'll hear about from our friends here. Basically, the systems we have now are not integrated in a fashion that's very efficient or effective. We want to come with a series of programs that are going to be one basic system. It's going to be our finance, it's going to be our budget, and it's going to be our human capital, so that they all link and we don't have these intermediary interfaces and systems what we have to maintain to make sure that system A is talking to system B is talking to system C. We want system A to be the system with 3 modules sharing data and information underneath it. So there's been Herculean efforts before I got here to get this going. I have been through system implementations in the past, and I know for sure there will be issues regardless if we implement April 6th or if we do it 6 months beyond that. There's always rough patches after you start a new system, and you can't anticipate what they are. What I've asked, though, is where we know we have to delay part of the implementation, these parking lot items, that we have them identified, documented, and that our contractor remains on board until these parking lot items are absolutely integrated, implemented, and working correctly. And we have that concurrence from our contractor right now. So I have faith that we will get this done, and I believe it'll go smoothly. But there's still some really high hurdles that have to be hit in the next 4 to 5 weeks. So the people who know and the people who've been in this battle for quite a while will brief you. I think you know everybody, but why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
I'm Pete Chevney, Chief Technology Officer.
I'm Nasser Zurek, Supervisor for the Enterprise Resource Planning Program.
I'm Debbie Camp, Administrator for Business and Finance Support with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Go right ahead.
Okay, the financial management system is over 10 years old, and if you recall from prior briefings that we have very complicated systems, a lot of systems that talk to each other. And we are in the process of migrating the financial system FMS to a cloud-based solution. The efforts to start the migration started a little bit over a year ago, and it is a significant implementation requiring a lot of people, hundreds of meetings, literally hundreds, probably 800, 900 meetings took place. Meetings and work sessions took place during the last year to ensure that we deliver the system that our users are looking for. This is a very lengthy upgrade. All upgrades similar to this are lengthy, go into the future. As Dan was indicating the future system we will be going to. Actually, the upgrade will take place in the middle of the night while we are all asleep. This is not a joke. It's going to happen. It's going to require some testing, of course, some prep work, but the upgrade itself will take place overnight. During the last year, a lot of activities have taken place in regard to configuring the system, validating processes, and we conducted 3 test cycles, including user acceptance testing cycle. Okay, you're looking at the result of the user acceptance testing as of February 20, so it's a little bit out of date, but it's not much. And we have over 92% success rate for items that were tested and declared completed. We're still working through some issues. As Dan indicated, there are issues we'll be probably working until the midnight of the conversion. But there is, as of today, there is no showstopper. All items we have are items we will be able to address, or we may go live with some of these items being open with a workaround solution. But there is no showstopper.
Yeah, as of right now, there's no showstoppers, but if there was a showstopper to rear its ugly head, we do have the alternative to delay. I don't expect that, I don't want that, but before we implemented something that we knew wasn't going to work, we would delay. And we have that alternative up until the 31st.
So this is a picture of what it's a screenshot of our landing page for the financial management system. So for those of you who have been in to look at the mileage expense option in FMS, or to approve requisitions, as Ms. Dixon did as principal, it looks a lot different. And the feedback that we're getting from people who are new to the system, our end users, they're very excited about the change. And it's interesting because there are always things, and we are working through some issues and some things that don't work quite as smoothly as we want. But people don't seem to be discouraged by that because they are so ready for change. This is an example of some of the feedback that we got from some sneak peek demos that we did. We've also gathered input from our change agents who are out in the schools and the offices. We included end users from schools and from offices in our user acceptance testing. We had a week of work sessions for people to come in and sit down with scripts and test the system out. Everything wasn't perfect, so we gathered their input, and actually most of it was not the system itself, but it was how the scripts were written and our training documents that were works in progress. So we've made some adjustments as we go along, and this is, I think the implementers, when they first came in and talked to us about how these kinds of implementations go, the word that I remember most is agile. There is definitely a need to be agile in this entire project. So it's been an experience, and this is where we are right now. We are about a month away, almost a month away from projected go live.
During the next few weeks, a significant amount of activities are going to take place to prepare for the cutover. Communication has went to the principals and directors about activities going to take place with the financial management system, what they can do and what they cannot do. Definitely, we need to hold certain activities a couple of weeks before we perform the conversion, so we can have clean cutoff of data. And we have worked closely with our functional users at the Division of Controller, Procurement, Warehouse, to ensure that we can do everything humanly possible to minimize impact on our users in school. And we're crossing the fingers and looking forward to go live with the new system on April 6th. All current users will have access to the future system, which means every user, every MCPS employee will be able to enter mileage and enter their expenses. For other responsibilities, users will be going through training, and as soon as they complete that training, we'll grant them access to the new system.
It's also important to remember that the old system will remain in view-only mode for the foreseeable future. Quite often there's lots of questions about trends and some of the analysis, so we'll be able to go back and look at the current data also.
Some of the activities that are going to cut off in mid-March relate to purchasing. So there's going to be this phased cutoff period where schools, there's going to be a final date for them to submit requisitions, purchase requisitions in the financial management system. There'll be a final date for them to submit their mileage expense reimbursements. We're emphasizing to to everyone that this is not the fiscal year end cutoff. So that doesn't mean that their money is going to go away. It just means that they won't be using FMS to do their typical business activities. So there's going to be a blackout period of a couple of weeks where they won't be able to submit purchase requisitions. However, they will be able to use their JP Morgan purchase card, and both their independent activity fund and their operating funds are linked to those. We have arranged for them to do that. So people are, some of the end users who we spoke with are saying, well, we don't have cards. And we say, that's a great reason to get one. So,
And this doesn't affect payroll. Payroll continues, we'll just load it once we go live with the new system.
right. However, there will be a blackout period for Lawson that is related to this go live, and that is required for, and it's getting like really techie, but that's required for the change in the chart of accounts because the two systems interface. Do you want to say anything more about that?
The two systems don't talk to each other without some caring and feeding.
For now.
So,
Very
in
good.
terms of care and feeding, has, the prospect of this going live scared folks at the schools? Just in terms of, this is something new that we have to deal with. I think it might have been FMS, and I remember scared a business manager into retirement.
That wasn't me. That was the person that was before me.
Right.
At Bay Branch High School.
That's how I got you.
I remember.
Planning to talk about this later on, but I'll give you the answer right now. As Dan indicated earlier, there is going to be time post go live when people are going to be needing extra support.
Right.
And
right.
we
And
know
you're
about
planning
it,
for that.
and this is,
Yeah.
like part of the implementation.
Great.
And a significant system like this, it may take 6 to 8 months actually. I'm going to use the word to stabilize. The system will be stable, but for people to be comfortable with the system, there are a lot of people who don't perform the same activity every day. Somebody who may do one purchase order every 6 months may need some extra help, and we are aware of this, and we're going to be discussing what plans we have to support our users in schools and offices.
Great. Thank you.
I guess, you talk about, does this scare anyone? I mean, anytime we're changing systems, it scares me. Because I lived through the student information system change that was a disaster, and bridges had been burned, but I understand, you're not going live. I mean, you don't have a showstopper now, but I mean, and everyone's working diligently. I mean, I realize technology has also changed since that, but it scares me, and as an old dog also, I can appreciate that, changes to any kind of system, it's, for some people, it is harder than for other people.
Back in the early 80s, when we went from 8-column to 10-column paper, people were scared. That was my first big implementation.
I think it's fair to say that we are bearing the brunt of the fear as much as we can to alleviate the fear of our users. But you're right, change is scary, and there are some people who are scared, but there are a lot of people who are really excited too.
Great.
So.
Good.
Yeah.
I remember the student information system and FMS too.
That's coming too, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
I remember the
it's an
student information
memorable year,
system and the
yes.
kids, no schedules out in the
Yes.
halls waiting or, whatever.
Yes.
And not purchasing after March, that's always scary. I think they used to have May But purchasing for the next year, I know the school's going to be
Right.
asking about that.
So we will have, there's going to be a couple weeks of blackout period for purchasing in the system. This will not affect, like I say, schools that have and offices that have the purchase cards will be able to use those purchase cards for the purchases. The operating funds are not going away. When we come back up in the cloud, they will be able to use the cloud system to continue their FY20 spending until the May cutoff dates that have yet to be, those will come out later. So it's going to be, I think that people are trying to do whatever they need to do now, so they can do their orders and their transactions in a familiar system. But we started last week our end user training. We had 1 week of sessions, Monday through Friday, mornings and afternoons. They're three-hour sessions. We are blessed to have the Octo training team on it. And we have awesome trainers, and we had, I had our implementer, our solutions architect, come and sit in on a session, and he walked away incredibly impressed with the scope. I mean, we had two training rooms opened up together. A lot of people, he said he had an incredible appreciation for the magnitude of this implementation. We had, last week, 143 people who were trained, and like I say, these are morning sessions and afternoon sessions. The mornings last week were procurement related, and the afternoons were journals, general ledger, inquiry, and reporting. The audience for last week's training are change agents and our change coaches. These are primarily the people from the schools, our elementary admin secretaries, the business administrators, and the school financial specialists, who are going to be answering questions of the staff from their schools who also attend training or do the online training. We have, I think it's about 85 face-to-face sessions that are currently scheduled, and there are 6 online courses that will be rolling out a little bit later in March as we get closer to the go live.
Speaking of your question, I do know that the warehouse expects a big influx of requests in the next couple of weeks. We spoke to them, and they're all on hand also.
They're bracing themselves, and they keep saying to me, there might be some overtime. We'll figure it out. We will figure it out. So, our training plan, we've got, we consider the business users, the core business users are the staff in the business offices, the financial services, and division of controller, and procurement, and materials management. Also in construction and facilities management. These are the people who are, we have leads from our teams because they use this system to do they live and breathe the systems to do their work. Then we consider our end users. We have central office end users and school end users. These are also our administrators who approve requisitions and are responsible for their financial monitoring. Again, we're going to have ongoing training available in the online mode, but we also, after we get through this initial push for the training and go live in April, the trainers are going to keep monthly courses, face-to-face courses available for our end users throughout the following year, although there's going to be greatly impacted by the student information system training. So there's lots of training going on.
Okay, when we go live, we want to be ensure that people receive support in timely manner. And the first point of contact is going to be the help desk. We have worked closely with the help desk to create special queues so the calls in regard to the new cloud solution are not mixed with the other calls that the help desk receive. And we are also going to have, in the old days, they used to call them war rooms. We're going to call them solution rooms. We're going to have people standing, working together in those solution rooms, in multiple rooms. That's going to be a combination of technical, functional, and consultants for the first 6 weeks, working closely in the same room to ensure that any help desk ticket come in is addressed within reasonable amount of time, and all information is kept in one place.
And we are also scheduling early ordering work sessions for the schools to come in and work at computers with the assistance of procurement staff to do their early ordering. That usually begins in mid-May.
I would like to add one more thing, indicated the 6 weeks where the vendor will be on site. Past that, we have 6-month warranty from the go-live date for anything that breaks due to implementation.
Okay.
In addition to that, we're working on long-term support plan to ensure that we have access to support when our users need such support, because these systems are being updated very often. MCPS does not have the staffing with the cloud skills that changes periodically, quarterly. So we will be coming to you and to the full board at one point in the future asking for funding and authorization. We have the funding, asking for authorization to procure such services.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Just a little anecdote from this project. I think that one of our first or biggest ahas was this not too long ago, when Pete talks about how wonderful these systems are because they're updated and they're current, so you're always taking advantage of the current technology. We were getting ready for for training and getting all of our materials together, and we got an update, and it changed the way the screen looked. And a lot of the training materials that had been developed or worked on so far, we needed to go back and change the screenshots, because in some cases there were some things that were just the way it worked was different. So we learned.
Yeah, and that's gonna happen periodically. Part of our contract with Oracle is we're required to take their quarterly updates. So there will be minor patches or corrections quarterly, which may or may not impact our business process, and we'll have to stay on top of that and be flexible if that does happen.
And the advantage of that, MCPS will never be behind on technology moving forward, and we will be able to take advantage and opportunity for all new future releases.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm just very impressed with what we do in terms of technology. It's amazing. So I'm sure it will go well. Do you guys have?
Good luck.
Yeah.
Break a leg, as they say in show business.
And then on to SIS and budget on July 1st. So we don't sleep for about a year.
Judy, did you want to say anything? Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, we are now ready for 6.2, the Independent Activity Fund Committee update. I'm not sure how much you've got on that, but
A little bit.
okay.
I have a little bit to bring. First off, I guess this happened before I started this role, so I just have a real quick, brief of what we've done to date and what our budget for 21 includes for this purpose. The charge of the Independent Activity Fund Committee was to study the equity and availability of the IAF. We all know that some schools have more equity or IAF funds than others based on communities and availability of resources. We did a briefing for you guys in September, and this is just a quick follow-up. Some of the issues that were in the report that were presented to you included the development of a central fund for distribution to the highly impacted schools and schools with an identified need, equitable access to field trips, which is what Aranza is going to speak about in a moment. The discussion about cell tower, and are we distributing cell tower dollars the most effective way for MCPS in total, if there's a way of offsetting some inequities with the cell tower. I know that's been a discussion in the past. Not sure if we're ready to tackle that now or not, but it's a discussion we could have at any time. What came out of those discussions really, I believe, is our 21 budget requests. We have a $1.6 million ask for our Equity and Innovation Fund. And that fund includes $300,000 for the Equity Seed Fund, $300,000 for our Innovation Fund, $500,000 for our Community School and Planning, and the recruitment expansion of $500,000 so that we can get out and get the teachers and support staff we need for the children. The way these two funds work is the purpose of the Equity Seed Fund is to distribute funds to the more highly impacted schools and schools with identified needs in a more equitable way. That's where the $300,000 will be set aside, and as people need these resources, they will come back in some form and request these resources, and they will be distributed so that it improves equity system-wide. The Innovation Fund, which I find to be very interesting, something I had never seen before, the fund is to provide the school communities with resources to implement innovative ideas, so to close some of these gaps in access. And I think the really important part there is people can come forward with ideas that have never been tested before, things that the 600 people here at Carver have never thought of. It's new ideas, maybe people from industry have seen or people from other governments have seen how we can use these dollars to create a more balanced funding for all of the schools. Ideas that maybe people around the table here have never had, but they're really good ideas waiting to be tested. And I think that's what the Innovation Fund will do for us. I think it helps people who have these one-off thoughts, bring them forward that are maybe the answer for some of these equity issues. So I'm really interested to see how that works going into the future. That's what I have from the finance side of the equation. I'd like to turn it over to Aranza.
Okay. All right, and still morning? Okay.
Yes, you have a half hour.
Another half hour, so good morning. So one of the asks from that September 16th meeting was around access to field trips, particularly in the categories of recommended curricular field trips. One of our follow-ups was, and I worked closely with Sharon Steele, who's my counterpart in the Office of the Chief Academic Office, to look at what recommendations could we make from central office to schools to be able to provide some of, not so much the innovative thinking behind it, but here's some tried and true that we see connections to the curriculum that could be options for field trips. One of the other asks was around parent donations. We've always tried to balance that field of equity with students and saying, you know, that we provide waivers for students to engage in activities, but what were other ways that we could balance that for schools? And so then providing an option if parents wanted to make donations, to make that communicated so that they would have an option and a pathway for schools to manage that. And then the last follow-up was around looking at the current state of field trips. So just where are we with schools and how they're accessing and the types of opportunities they're providing for students. So we provided an update to the board back in October that really looked at, there was, I think October, around the late October, that provided an update on the curricular field trips. We were able to categorize those by the content areas, whether it was history or science or social studies, and we really focused at the elementary level because I believe that was the interest of the board, was to look at K-5. And Ms. Dixon, I think you had a special request around the Maryland State House and what those field trips looked like. So they were, the curriculum office was really able to identify at least 5 to 6 per content area, and then identify whether or not it was a K-5 or a particular grade level, and look at the fee versus non-fee interest. So I think I calculated and went back and looked at specifically around the Maryland State Capitol, that we had probably 687 elementary students who availed themselves of that opportunity, that it was really more about, I think, 5 or 6 schools that carried those students to that particular experience, and the cost of the trip ran from $0 to maybe $10. So it was a nominal expense for students. But when we looked at the current state of all field trips, and last week, I guess it was last week, at the board, we talked about the different kinds of field trips, that there are field trips that are local, which are considered field trips that are within 50 miles of this building, of Carver Building, and that they return to the school no later than 7:00 p.m. So those are those local field trips, and we have schools document that for us on a local school field trip log. So if we look at the local school field trips, in the total database around that, there are 156,726 students that were recorded as having participated in what we would deem local field trips. They could have been excursions away from the school. There could have been activities where a entity or organization came into the building to conduct experiments with students or expose them to different parts of learning. But there were 156 students, and that was calculated over 2,067 events. When we look at those activities that were extended day, meaning they went beyond the 7:00 p.m. return, out of area more than 50 miles away from the building, or overnight, there were about 42,500 of those students that were involved in those types of activities. The cost and the range of activities were from free to, I think the most expensive ones I saw were some performance-based, like the band or chorus that were going to Hawaii. So for those types of student organizations, that's where we saw events that actually cost more money. So I think, there were like $300 maybe for a weekend in New York because it was a particular student organization. They were going to plays and other types of excursions, band or performances that were in Hawaii or Florida. So those student organization ones that had like a higher ticket price. What we do know from what we've gathered from the schools and from the paperwork that they submit to us is that for those types of activities, there's lots of fundraising that the school is doing to offset that cost. And so that kind of gives us the idea around that. The Capitol excursion, I think there were 12 schools. I went back to my notes. There were 12 schools that went to the Capitol specifically. And I think the only other thing I wanted to share, well, maybe that's it. And let's see what questions you might have about those.
Well, there may have only been 12 schools that went to the Capitol. There were tons going to St. Mary's, the historic city in St. Mary's, because I went through this list over the weekend, and there were also quite a few schools with end-of-the-year activities. I saw Hershey Park, and I thought I saw King's Dominion.
Yes.
And some a couple of pools. But I was impressed how many were going to historic St. Mary's City.
We want them to continue
Yes,
doing that.
absolutely.
Right?
I mean, no, I mean, I think that's important. In fact, I remember going on that field trip, but we weren't, MCPS wasn't chartering buses. We were using school buses. That was a long ride on a school bus to St. Mary City.
No air conditioning.
No air conditioning and noisy.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you for doing that and highlighting that, because I think it's huge for our students to have the opportunity to go places. When the board was up at, Annapolis for the MABE luncheon and interaction with the delegates and senators, Ms. Mondrowski, Ms. Wolf, it was me and Ms. Suskin. Yeah. We went over to see the new statues that are there of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. You would have thought that we were interacting with two rock stars. It was really exciting. And of course, you know, George Washington is around the corner. You can stand next to him as well, and when he resigned his commission there at the State House. But it really is a very inspiring, historic building, and really, and I mentioned this to the principal at Carter Rock Springs when I visited, and he wrote down, because his kids hadn't been, and I think they're going to do that as well. So, you know, even if 1, 2 kids get an opportunity to do this, it makes a difference. It really, really does. So thank you for doing that, and hopefully, you know, OSSI is, or whatever their new name is, as they work with principals, you know, will encourage them to do that, because it just is really, really important.
As I looked through the list, not only did I see a lot of historic St. Mary City, but I was also looking at it with an eye toward what schools are going, and I thought it was
Right.
an equitable list.
Good. No. Judy, did you want to? No? Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much. And let me just make sure where we are here. I think we are at the Board of Ed expenditure report. Did you have any questions about that? I think it's pretty straightforward in the sense that, and we would like the public to know, no member of the Board of Education has a credit card, so we're not charging anything. You know, we are reimbursed for our mileage, which we put down on a clipboard, and also if we attend conferences, but that's pretty much it. And Miss Webb keeps us on a short leash there. So,
Well,
but anyway, so if you have questions about that,
I just want to thank Ms. Gibson for putting it together. She did
Right.
a really nice
She
job.
does. She does.
worked with us, and it's
Right.
it's a really nice report.
Right.
Very
She's
understandable.
wonderful.
Thank you.
She really is.
And just, you know, to your point, it's posted online.
Right.
It remains there online.
All the time.
And it's been posted for several years. So
Right.
members of the public who want to go back 2 or 3 years have the ability to go back and take a look.
Right.
But there are no credit cards.
Right. And if you have any questions about anything, just write directly to Ms. Webb, those who are looking in. Okay. All right. So I think, do you ladies have any new business, final comments, questions? Yeah? Okay. So our next meeting will be on May 4th at 10 a.m. here. And we are ready to adjourn.